All right, folks. So today we are going to start a new chapter or to learn about memory hierarchy and cache memory. So now this is another very important topic in computer architecture because cache memory is usually very often asked a question in interviews. Okay, I mean, generally, if company is coming to interview you from, say, a company like ARM or some other company, possibly they will ask something on memory architecture, right? So I think that's the reason I decided to spend about 3 hours on cache memory, maybe 4 hours. Fourth hour will possibly work on cache coherence problem that happens when the cache memory is shared among multiple cores or multiple processor within a chipset, right? Then how do we keep cache coherent enough? So we'll talk all these difficult topics or kind of difficult but very important topic because all processes today are multi-core. Then how do you share cache and how do you write such that it's a proper write, in the sense that if one core writes into cache, it may corrupt the cache, right? And then so consistency becomes very important. So we'll look at those aspects little later, but let's start with the basic things why we need cache memory, right? So I have taken contents from basically a Berkeley presentation. Then this book is just simply excellent. I mean, I would think that you should read this chapter on memory hierarchy from this Bryant and Helleron's book. Just too good. Okay, and some few things I have taken it from MIT lecture on computing or computation structures. This also nice. I mean, kind of presentation available. All right, so let's start with this diagram. I think you would have gone through this diagram several times, and it's very important diagram because this tells us about computer organization in general. So we have data path. Okay, and data path consists of the registers. Data path is path where data moves or data gets manipulated, right? So we have PC registers and ALU, and then we have control logic. And then memory consists, here we have shown a unified memory, which consists of data memory and instruction memory. Okay, and then this interface we have seen. So we'll not discuss this now. So one thing you need to understand is that processor view is always that of address space. Okay, so basically we'll come to the diagram later, but what is happening on this side is not visible to processor. A processor programmer is not aware of any programmer that does do assembly language programming is not aware of the fact that there is a cache memory. Okay, the processor always request a word from memory or a byte from memory, and that's based on address space. And address space we have seen is that every processor has a word sorry, address length that it can address to. So in case of RISC is 32 bits. So address space for processor is between 0 if because the byte address memory to 2 raised power 32 minus 1. Okay, this is the address space. Now how we are going to structure the memory for a processor, because processor will view only the address space. How we are going to structure is this is where the beauty lies. Okay, and this kind of abstraction where we have processor has visibility only of address space, give simplicity. Okay, so now we have to see how to build all this. Right now we have assumed this is main memory. Okay, and main memory we have seen consists of DRAM. Okay, and is a volatile memory, and then we can connect to that disk, etc. But right now this the model. Okay, now we have to improve on this, and we can do improvement over using memory hierarchy. And we have seen this we have studied this concept several times before. Okay, and then I'm just revising it, and please feel free to ask me questions. Okay, otherwise I will ask you questions. Okay, all right. So at the top, we have processor or CPU, which executes at very fast speed, right? I mean, usually the clock is speed, I mean, nowadays in processor is about 5 gigahertz. Okay, and then we see it's not alone. There are multiple cores inside, right? There can be 4 cores at least in any desktop, or even mobile phone, up to maybe 16 cores and so on. So it means so many processors are working in parallel. And then we have seen these processors are not that they will execute one instruction in a cycle, but we have seen that processors also execute multiple instructions because of pipelining. And we can have also duplicate or triplicate pipelines, and then we can execute multiple instructions in multiple pipelines together. Okay, so this is working at, not only 5 gigahertz, but this 5 gigahertz is only clock speed, but within one clock we can execute multiple instruction if we have multiple pipelines, parallel pipelines. Okay, let's assume that right now we are executing only one instruction per cycle. That could be simple as possible. Then below this we have processor registers. We have seen the concept of registers, right? In this example, we have registers here, and registers operate almost at the processor speed. It's not same as processor speed, but access time is usually within a clock cycle. It's about a clock cycle. Okay, where in CPU we can assume it runs at much faster speed. And then we have seen that we have multiple levels of cache. Okay, we have level 1 cache, level 2 cache, level 3 cache. Okay, I will ask you a question: why 3 levels of cache, and why not more, why not less, and what is difference? Why can't we have just single cache? Many years back we used to have one level of cache only. And I will ask you this question. You'll have to think yourself and answer me. And then we have random access memory. Here we call this main memory. Okay, and then below this we have seen we have solid state memory, because this technology came just about 7, 8 or 10 years back. Or we have flash drive. Earlier, I mean, computers which I bought some 10 years back never had this flash. Even now, most of the computers don't have flash memory. My Apple desk laptop which I bought 7 years back doesn't have any flash memory, solid state memory, right? But we have then disk. Okay, sorry, this is a flash memory, and then we have disk drive. And below this disk drive also we can have a tape drive, which is not shown here. So what we see here is that as we go up, the speed goes up, right? Okay, so speed is going up this way. Access speed of CPUs, of course, CPU is consumer of all this. So registers operate at very fast speed. Then cache memories are there, and as we go in each cache level, the speed becomes slower, or as we go up, speed becomes faster. Similarly here, and so on, right? And second thing on the right hand side we have seen is that the capacity also uh, goes down as we move up. It means a smaller number of registers are very few. Then we have, so maybe for example, so in case of RISC-V, we have 32 registers, and each can store 32 bits. So 32 into 32 is approximately 1 kilobytes, 1 kilobits. Okay, so 1 kilobit of data we can have, but here we can have, much higher capacity, and this will have much higher, this will have further high capacity. We'll see the relationship, and this will be 100 times more, this may be 1,000 times more, and so on. Okay, so as we come down, we'll have higher and higher capacity. All right, any question on this one? No? Shall we move ahead? Okay, all right. So in this class, we will study the following: cache memory concept, principle of locality, and how memory hierarchy exploits this locality, and memory access using caches. All right, so we'll look at these simple concept. So today's class is all about concept. The next class we will see how about the organization of cache, and later third class then we'll look at again organization and the performance. Okay. uh, all right, so please feel free to ask me questions, because this gives me opportunity of learning. Okay, if you ask something and if I don't know, then I it's really fun for me to learn about it, right? Okay.
Sir, I have a doubt.
हाँ बोलिए.
Sir, why is the cache memory kept small in size? Is it
Okay,
because it's expensive?
yeah, we will come to that. Surely, it's a good question, but in general, anything that is small is fast. Okay, if you create very large size cache memory, I'm giving very trivial answer. It may be just see, one principle we have studied is that smaller is faster. Okay, so if the size is very big, then access time will be higher in general. Okay, so take this concept right now. So anything that moves closer to processor will be faster. Okay, we'll come to that. Your question is very good, and that actually is motivation for using cache. Okay, so cache in general you think is a faster, very fast compared to memory. We'll see the relationship now, huh? And keep this question till the end of this presentation, because I'm trying to answer this question, because I have asked this question to myself, and then I have got the answer from somewhere, right? So that's the reason you find presentation have references of multiple sources. Okay, all right, so let's look at the concept first. The processor, let's look at where all we have memory or storage in a computer, right? So processor, when we say processor, right, and if you go back to the diagram here, then here is the storage inside processor, which is registers, which is kind of D-type flip-flop, but very high speed, right? Operates almost at the speed of clock. Okay, so the first storage is this, and how many bytes we can store? Almost like 100 bytes. Okay, it's like this 32 registers we have, and each can store 32 bits or 4 byte. So approximately 100, in the order of 100 bytes. Okay, or you can say about 1000 bits. All right. And registers can be accessed in sub nanosecond, and you can have this relationship, right? The clock speed is approximately 2 to 5 gigahertz, and then 1 by that will be nanosecond, right? And divide by this will be 0.2 nanosecond or even smaller. Okay, so and we have seen, when we have studied single and multi-cycle design, we have seen that single cycle we can access a register. So essentially less than 1 nanosecond we can access the registers. They are very fast, and that's the reason we can't have too many, because if we have too many of registers, and these are expensive devices, right, then cost will be high. And secondly, there is no greater advantage of having very large number of registers, and we'll see why. Okay, so we have optimized this to certain numbers, say 32 in case of RISC. Okay, if we are very less, then we have to keep the data all the time in main memory, and then cost will be much higher of bringing the data into, in terms of access speed, it will be very, very slow. Okay, and if it's just too many, then there is no advantage of having too many, because when programs are in execution, we use, not everything is, not all the registers will be used all the time. Okay, so this is what we have, about 100 bytes in processor, inside processor. Then we have main memory. Okay, and it's in gigabyte. Okay, and access time is 50 to 100 nanosecond. Okay, this was the model in 1980s. Okay, when I bought my first PC, this is the model. We have main processor, and there was main memory. There was nothing in between. Okay, what was the reason for that? Okay, we'll come to the reason. Just hold on for some time. Now you note down the difference between speed of processor and main memory. Okay, so this is 100 nanosecond, this is some nanosecond, say 0.1 nanosecond. So difference in speed is about 1000 times. You get it? It means that if instruction execution take one cycle, okay, when everything is available in register, etc., it will take one cycle. Let's assume add instruction will take one cycle. The reading from main memory will require 1000 cycles. So, is a main memory just getting a data to register will take 1000 cycles. So, you can see the huge difference in processor and memory, main memory speed, right? So, we will need say hundreds or thousands of cycles just to get data to main memory. And this was fine at certain point in time, right? So, now look at this curve. So, this orange curve shows the performance of CPU or processor. Okay, and this line, which is purple line or blue line, I don't know what you say, is performance of memory, DRAM or main memory. DRAM, whenever you use word DRAM, is actually main memory. Okay, so in 1980s, processors were very slow and memory was also slow. And this gives the answer of the question which I asked just few minutes back. Why there was no cache? Because whatever speed processor was executing, it could get the instruction at the same rate, same speed from memory, and both were matching. So there was no gap in speed of processor and memory because processors were inherently slow. Okay, then what happened? We have studied Moore's law. Performance of processor increased almost linearly, and we said that performance improved at the rate of 55% 2 years. So we said 1.5 years or 2 years, processor speed doubles. Okay, so it was a almost like linear increase here, up to almost like 2000, year 2001 and 2004, 2, 3 sometimes, and then flattened out because of the reason we studied. And while the memory performance improved in this way, and improvement was 7% per year, and this gap becomes almost like 1000 times. I mean, if you look at it, it's 10 versus 10,000 approximately. It's more than 10,000 time performance difference. When we say performance, it means what? Access speed, we can think, right? In terms of or time it takes to access memory was 1000 times slower than what processor was executing. If processor takes one cycle, memory will take 1000 cycles to get that data to processor, right? And if we just use this main memory as we were using in 80s, what will happen? Every fetch of instruction will take 1000 cycles, second fetch will take 1000. So we will have to execute at the speed of memory. Okay, any question? Which is 1000 times slower than what it is today. All right, understanding or any confusion about it?
Sir, when you are saying that processor takes one cycle and the main memory takes 1000 cycles, so okay, I get that the memory is taking 1000 cycles to fetch that data and give it back to the processor. But what is the processor exactly taking one cycle for?
We have studied that, right? We have spent so many classes to understand in one cycle what processor can do.
Okay.
What is output of a pipeline, 5-stage pipeline? One instruction per cycle?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, so a processor is capable of execution of instruction in one cycle. Okay, then you have to wait for 1000 cycles to get next instruction. So basically there is total mismatch between the two. Okay, and that will, so it means that after execution you get all the operands from memory. First you get instruction with operands. Okay, and let's assume you don't have to do anything. Then you have to wait for so many cycles for getting the instruction.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that will, let's assume even if you have pipeline of this, sometime or other you will face problem in instruction pipelining also, right? So so this was actually major cause of the problem that people started thinking what to do. There is a huge speed mismatch, and then came this concept, right? So this is again the old diagram, and then people thought, okay, the good idea is that let's have a scratch pad in between, something called cache. Okay, now we'll have to see that why cache should work, because memory could be 1000 times bigger or 10,000 times. This is 10,000 bigger than this, so there should be reason that this will work, this should work. And what is that reason? That we'll see. Why caches are useful, although this is we can say this works almost at the speed of processor, but this we have seen this is very small in size, right, compared to main memory, maybe 10,000 times smaller. Okay, then how should it work? Because it can contain a small amount of data. Then we'll see how. Okay, so let's look at first library analogy. Okay, this is again about the concept which you have understood by now, why we need cache. Okay, let's assume that you are in a big library, not of course IIT Mandi, IIT Goa library, which is very tiny. Like if you go to Washington DC, you go to biggest library out there in USA, which may have 10,000 halls and something like 5,000 halls and so on and so forth, right? So you go to very big library, and if I give you a task to write an essay or presentation, make a presentation on history of computers, let's assume, and your internet is not there, I ask you to use only library, don't use internet. Okay, so this is out. So what you'll do, you will you need some books. Okay, and then you'll have to take out books from the shelf. You go to computer science department or computing history department and take the books to your desk. Okay, and you have been given on the desk a separate shelf, a small shelf. It happens in most of the libraries that you have a separate chamber, and small cubicles are made, and then a small shelf, so you can bring the books out there, right? And if you need more, you go back to main shelves somewhere in the back of the library and bring the books. Okay, and then you don't return these books if you still need them, right? So until you finish your task, you retain them with you. Okay, note that you have only small amount of space to carry to hold certain number of books, say maybe 10 books or 15 books at most on your desk. And so question is that which books you will keep. Of course you will keep the books related to your requirement, right, which gives you history of computer. Suppose you need one more book, suppose you don't find something, then you again go back and bring the book here, and this book will also remain on the shelf if there is space. Okay, now most of the time, now you started writing, so most of the time you're referring these 10 books, and if there is a need, you go back and get the book. So now once you have finished this getting books, then most of the time you're using localize the books that are on your shelf. Okay, now what is the excess time for looking at the book? Because you just move your hand and then get the book, instead of had you not had that shelf, every time you would have gone and bring a book, and since you don't have space and you are like a CPU, then you'll have to, whatever books you have brought earlier, you'll take it back to main shelves, right? So now you can see that how it is, although number of books that you have, say approximately 10, is very tiny fraction of all that is in the library, say 0.00001% of the books in the library, yet your job is done at maximum speed, right? Because you have brought them locally and you are using them. Okay, so the analogy as follows: you have huge library, and then you just get the book and put them on the shelf. Now replace that shelf by cache. Okay, so now the cache is of limited size, and your requirements grows and grows, or your friend also comes and sits next to you and he also needs book on certain topic, then this cache will become full, and then you'll have to replace some of the books to main library and bring the books. So this is exactly the concept in which the cache works. Any question? Is it okay? Okay, all right. I hope you understand it. Now, why should it work? Okay, it works primarily because your requirement is all local here, right? Once you have brought 10 or 12 books, most of the time you are using these books. So you can see that your demand is only localized. Okay, similarly, the program that you write goes to certain memory location most of the time. Okay, and this is within, and this is called locality, principle of locality. Okay, it says the program access only a small portion of the full address space at any instant of time. Okay, so it means that, for example, in earlier library example, you are using only certain number of books related to the topic. You are reading 4 or 5 or 6 books, right? And you will find in library these are also around the same place. Okay, that's called principle of spatial locality, space related locality. What does it mean? If you are reading an instruction, or if you are bringing an instruction to CPU, very likely that you will bring the next instruction. You're very likely that you will bring the third instruction and fourth instruction and fifth instruction in general. Okay, that's called spatial locality. And if you bring all the instruction that you are likely to execute, say 40 or 50 of them, into cache, then most of the time you will be around that, because the first instruction is there, you access it from cache, second you access from it, third you access from cache. So instead of bringing only first instruction, you bring all, say, 100 instruction at a time to cache. So then your access speed is faster. Okay, somebody's mic is on. Let me see whose mic is on. Okay. Aditi, can you switch off your mic, please? No, your mic is off. Yeah. All right. Anyway. All right. Thank you. Okay, you got it. And then secondly, very likely the instruction that you have executed in the program, same instruction will execute again. It means that the book you have been reading, very likely that you will, after a few minutes, you will write you will refer that book again. Okay, so the example here is, for example, somewhere where repeat the instructions like loops. Okay, so most program have either spatial locality, space related locality, if the one first, second, third, fourth, fifth instruction, or same instruction is executed multiple times. So for example, if you look, while do loop or for loop, what do? You execute all these instructions What does this show? First instruction, second, third, fourth, fifth. Spatial locality. You bring all these instructions into cache. Then you don't have to go to memory often, right? And what is then temporal locality? Each instruction that you're executing, first cycle you're executing, in the second cycle also you're executing, third cycle also you're executing all these instructions. The same instruction is getting executed multiple times. At the same time, adjacent instructions which are in the same locality will be also executed. Okay, so this is called principle of locality. Now the beauty is that now because you know you are using only a small portion of the whole address space, bring all that you need based on a special locality and temporal locality to the cache, and their job is done. Okay, all right. So address space in general holds both code and data. So what we have discussed just now is address or instruction related locality, but also data related locality we can have. For example, you are accessing, you are doing in the loop any array access, right? Say ai is equal to ai plus 1 plus 1 or something like that. Okay, so now array access which are doing like a1, a2, a3 and so on, these are what? Special locality in data. And similarly in the loop we can access the same data again and same memory again and again. Okay, all right. So we have this locality, principle of locality, applicable for both instruction and data. Any question? I think this is very simple, so you don't need to spend too much time about it. So as we said, we have temporal locality and space related locality, right? So this already we have discussed. So now pictorially we can show this as a temporal locality. It means the same memory location we are accessing again and again, like in for loop or while do loop, or and so on, or any loop. And spatial locality is that when you access one location, the next location also you are likely to read, right? So these are the two localities. Now look at this, is a memory pattern. Somebody has done this analysis. Of course, it's very old result published in 1971. It still remains the same. Okay, so on y-axis you have memory address which you are accessing. Because of, it could be because of instruction or it could be because of data. Memory address. Okay, and x-axis is time. Okay, so what does this line show then? Or the line here, what does it show? Does it show temporal locality or spatial locality?
So temporal locality.
Yeah, it shows temporal. It means the same address you are accessing again and again. Like maybe same instruction you are executing again and again, or maybe same data variable you are accessing again and again. For example, in a loop you have you are doing a is equal to b plus c. So a and b and c again and again are referenced, same memory location is referenced. So it's a temporal locality. And what does this show? This show, when you go up or down, it's adjacent locations, right? So this is one location, this other is second, third, fourth, fifth, is like this. So it means that in space a different, or this shows a spatial locality, because in space you are moving up and basically you are accessing adjacent addresses, right? So whenever we are this side, it shows we are accessing adjacent locations. Similarly, we are showing adjacent location. Here we are not showing so much of spatial locality. All right. So now in any program, you see most of the time we are either showing spatial locality or temporal locality. Otherwise, you see the diagram is all empty. Okay. Now look at this memory reference pattern. Okay, this is time, and again this shows address. So we have instruction fetches which will look something like this. It's essentially first instruction, second, third, fourth, fifth, one after other in time, and then maybe third, fourth, fifth, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. This essentially so shows that set of instruction we are executing repeatedly, which is nothing but loop, and then loop termination, and then so on. Similarly, we can see subroutine call is like this: first, second, third, fourth instruction, and there's no repeat then, right? There's no loop, and then argument access happens this way, and so on. So you can see that these kind of patterns we can study, and then based on that we can see, yes, what should be our memory hierarchy. Okay, in general this shows that most of the time our execution has some kind of locality. That's all we can infer from this one. All right, any question?
Could you please repeat that subroutine thing?
Okay,
about
here
the stack?
Okay, so basically what are you doing? In subroutine, what happens? You jump to a routine or a procedure, okay, and then execute this. So these instructions are executed one after other, or these memory reference are made. Had it been, this is one of the example, and then had it been loop inside this, then the structure should have been like this. Okay, and in that you are doing some argument access. Maybe one of the instruction is doing reading the arguments that you are passing in a function, right? So or maybe same argument you are reading, so essentially it's if it's a if it is just these ones, say first argument that you are passing in function, say there's some function, or inside that you have say int x and so on, and the procedure or function you are using this x repeatedly. Okay, maybe multiple instructions are using this. Okay, then you will have essentially same address being accessed multiple times. All right, so these are what this diagram shows you. Only few kind of memory access. It could be very many others also. Okay, all it says is that for most of these things that we do, even if you are doing something sequentially and there's no loop, then what are we doing? What kind of locality we will have? We have a spatial locality, space related locality. And we are doing loop, then we have temporal locality. That's all it's trying to say. Okay, similarly for data access, you can show that it's a scalar access and vector access. All right, so most of, remember that again there was one principle which says that most of the code remains only in 20% of the code area. Okay, even if it doesn't remain in 20% of the code area, and let's assume the control goes all over the program, then even then we can see this huge locality. Okay, all right, let's look at this example now. This is a very simple C program. Sum is equal to 0 for I is equal to 0 to I is less than n, increment I, and then sum is equal to sum plus ai. Now you tell me where is spatial locality and where is temporal locality. So reference array element in succession, okay, it means that you are reading ai, then you are reading ai plus reference array element in succession, elements in succession, ai plus 1 and so on. What kind of spatial locality it will have? Spatial or temporal?
Spatial, I think so.
Yeah, Aditi?
Hello.
हाँ बोलो
Yes,
क्या है?
sir.
Spatial.
I think spatial.
Okay, right. So sorry, this should be spatial, and you are accessing this variable sum in each loop, right? So what is this locality? Temporal, because you are using the same memory location, right? Sum is a variable we stored somewhere in memory. So this is a variable or memory location, and we are every cycle you are using this, right? So after some time, again you are using this is a temporal. Okay. Similarly, instruction references in sequence. Okay, here of course we have one instruction, but had we had multiple instructions, one after other, then of course is put another instruction here. So this is spatial, and then cycle through loop repeatedly. The same sort of instructions are executed multiple times. Then is a temporal. Okay, so in this example where we have very simple loop, we are using both temporal as well as spatial locality. Okay, so what do we do then? Once we have locality in then it exploit that locality using memory hierarchy. Okay, and the level closer the processor faster. We know that, like cache is the closest one is register, which is the fastest. Lower away from processors are larger and smaller. Okay, we have seen this. Okay, sorry. Okay, in this diagram, here something very close to processor is fast. This is the fastest. Okay, this is the fastest, and this is slowest. So what is our job now? Using this locality, what do we want to do? Okay, our goal is to create illusion of memory being almost as fast as the fastest memory and as large as the biggest memory of the hierarchy. Note that the biggest memory is slowest and cheapest, and that a memory at the top is which is first level cache is fastest and expensive, though smaller. Okay, so now our goal is, if this is a processor and it's an address space, it's a visibility, create illusion of memory. This is very fast and what? Very big. And of course you can add to this, and also not expensive. Create this illusion using this memory hierarchy. It means that whenever you need something, move the data one level up and second level up and so on. When you processor needs something, bring it to topmost level. And if you don't need it, it will start moving down. Okay, and so on. So similar to library, if you don't need books, if you suppose your control goes to a different part of the program, or if you start, you have written the essay on whatever you are writing, and you start writing on something else, then what do? I mean, all the books you have brought in, bring it back, take it back to the shelves and bring another set of books. Exactly what we are doing. But once you are in your job of execution in that program, or when you're writing that essay, then you don't need to send those books back until somebody comes and sits next to you and bumps you off. Okay, all right. So now we have same diagram that we have studied earlier. We have this is so we can say this is the biggest and slower and cheaper at this level. At this level we are smaller, faster and more expensive. Okay, and capacity, this is lower level, this higher level, and capacity also goes up if you come down. Okay, all right. So now we know that cache can hold a copy of subset of the main memory. Good. And we use word cache in general to refer to we in general we'll say we have cached something. It means that we have brought into the cache memory. Okay, and we'll use this notation data cache for D and dollar symbol, and then L1 cache, for example, we represent it with this one L1 dollars symbol. Now, you may when we have created this kind of memory hierarchy in general, okay, the question I may ask is that who is managing all that? When we say automatically managed, what is other alternative? Okay, we'll come to that. Okay, so basically this whole movement of data up and down is managed automatically. When we say automatically, it means that it's not managed by programmer. Or if your assembly language, it's not visible even to you. You cannot manage it. Okay, and or you move this data up and bring it to the cache that is needed based on anticipation that the data will be accessed again very soon. It's not that every time you bring the data to the cache, if you bring every time from main memory to the cache memory, then access time is same as bringing it to main memory, right? Bringing data from main memory. So you have to anticipate also what all is needed. For example, when you go to fetch a book to the back end of the library and it takes time, say 5 minutes or 10 minutes, then you are not going to bring just one book, but maybe 8 or 10 books together. Okay, all right. Any question? Okay, let's move fast, right? Okay, so we have this concept, and we can see the data in L1 cache is subset of data in L2 cache, is subset of data in main memory, is subset of data in secondary memory. Note this relationship has to be maintained. Whatever you are bringing here has to be here. This, whatever you're bringing here has to be in memory. And whatever you're bringing in here has to be in secondary memory. Why is that? Think about it, huh? And you can answer me later. See, otherwise there will be all chaos, right? How will you know that the data here is consistent or correct data? Okay, and if you don't bring, see, for example, you may not need some data at this point in time, and it's clean data, it's not really dirty. So then you, then it can be removed, but consistent data of that, or say the variable which was updated here is available here also. The next time it's accessed, you can bring it here. Okay, so we'll see how to do cache writing and reading later. Now note that when we transfer data between across a level, say for example secondary memory to main memory, memory to L2, L2 to L1, L1. So we have some unit that we transfer is called block. Okay, one block of data we move from L2 to L1 and main memory to L2. And so the terminology may little different. Say for example, between L1 and L2 we move a block. Between L2 and main memory, here we have not seen L3, we also move block. And between main memory and secondary memory we move something called page. Now the block size of block may also differ. Okay, the size of block is 8 to 32 bytes across L1, L2, and it could be 16 to 182 bytes. Different computers may have different block sizes between L2 and main memory, and page memory we will see around 4K or something. Okay, and we'll see how to move this, how can we manage that. And then processor actually may need just at a time maybe instruction or few data items, and maybe 4 to 8 bytes. It's a 4 byte, it means that we are accessing a word in in this 5. Okay, any question? Okay, all right. Now we have we know that something that is bigger is slower. So as we move towards hard disk, access time goes up, right? And we have seen that SRAM works at sub nanoseconds. That is the actual cache which is sitting next to uh, next to processor. Then look at the size; it's very small, 512 bytes. The next level of cache is what? Say L1 cache we take, right? It's a kilobyte to megabyte. Almost like we can say is a half kilobyte here. So it's almost like 10 to 20 times more in second level cache, and the speed is nanosecond. So you can see that within a cache of different levels of cache, L1, L2, and say L3, we can have capacity small but fast. Capacity little more than that, which is slightly slow. Then capacity bigger than that and slower. You may ask, all these are SRAMs, then why that is so? So I will ask this question to you and you need to find it out. But after a few slides, of course, we'll answer this. And then below cache, we have DRAM, which is main memory. And which is in gigabyte, right? I mean, this laptop that I have is 8 gigabyte of memory. And what is the difference between cache and then in terms of capacity? One, say, let's assume the 1 MB versus 1 gigabyte. 1 giga divided 1 mega, how much it is? 1000? Anyway, we'll find it.
1048.
Pardon?
1048.
Okay, all right.
1024, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Approximately 1000 we can say, right? And then hard disk is what? Terabyte. Okay, and access time, nanosecond versus millisecond. You can see that whole difference, right? And then cost also goes up as we move towards cache. Smallest cache that we have on top is most expensive. Then next level cache and next level cache. Why? Because the technology is different, right? When we even SRAM, when we create, right, then we see that the SRAM of L1 cache is of better quality. We are using bigger transistors which are of higher speed and consume more power. Here we are not bothered. At first level cache, we are not bothered about power consumption and other thing. We are bothered only about speed. Okay, all right. And then cost is huge difference, right, between the hard disk per gigabyte cost. So 1 gigabyte costs $1, and this is all, of course, old numbers in 2011. Now, and wherein 1 megabyte is $10. So it will maybe approximately, I don't know, maybe 10,000 times cheaper or so. Okay. All right. So now we can show this as follows. Of course, this slide is same that we have discussed so far. So what we are doing is that we have registers here in the data path, which fastest, then first level of cache, second level of cache, main memory, and secondary memory. Okay. All right. So these are on-chip components we shown in the blue. Okay. Basically, we can say that it is part of same motherboard. Okay, or maybe in a processor also we can implement first and second level of cache. Okay, if you do, for example, a WDM. Now look in terms of size, these are hundreds of bytes, because 32 into 32, it's almost like 32 bits into 32 is 1000 bytes approximately. And then the 10 case, this megabytes and gigabytes and terabytes. And then cost, of course, this is the highest, and the one at the disk is the lowest. Okay. Now this diagram I have lifted from MIT course, and it clearly compares difference in technology and speed. So registers work at 1 cycle, wherein L1 cache takes 2 to 4 cycles, L2 cache takes 10 cycles for data access, L3 cache takes 40 cycles. Main memory takes 200 cycles for access of data. Flash drive takes, it is shown in microseconds, so not in terms of cycles. So, and hard drive it takes about 10 milliseconds. And we can see this capacity of register is 1 kilobyte. We have seen already about 1000 bytes. And then level 1 cache is 32 kilobyte. This is 256 kilobyte, 10 megabyte, 10 gigabyte, and so on. The question is, who manages this? For the programmer is automatically managed, right? So register allocation we have seen is done by compiler. You know, when you do conversion of high level language into assembly language, it will convert into various for example, instruction add A, B, C, and so on. So A, B, C is registers, right? And these are registers allocated by the processor. Then L1 cache is managed by hardware. There is a within computer there is a controller that will control hardware. L2 cache is also controlled by hardware, and we can see only main memory, okay, is managed by OS or software. Similarly, if all these below, even hard disk, when you move data from hard disk to main memory, is controlled by OS and software. Okay, so cache, remember the caches are managed by hardware or controller, and then registers are controlled by compilers. All right. So the question I have asked you earlier is this one: what is the why we have 3 levels of caches? Why not 4 level? So all these things people have studied and done simulation and research and found out what is the optimal number of levels. And then we will also see that caches are of different type. I mean, for data cache is separate than instruction cache. And then we have seen how to share these caches among various processors. So this is a huge research area. And based on that, we have, most of the companies have decided to have multiple levels of cache. And we have seen that not all processors will have similar type of cache structure. It's all internal to them, and it's not usually visible to, people outside. But they will always specify a number of what is L1 cache, what is L2 cache. For example, in the processor you're using, laptop, please see that. Okay, so this thing we have already answered, that different caches are of different speed and they are made of different technology. For example, L1 cache is made from larger transistors which have wider metal tracks, and this results in higher speed but more space and power. It takes more area to, so that's the reason we can't have it, and hence it's expensive. Expensive in terms of money, also in terms of space and power. Hence we can't have whole cache memory which is of L1 type, and there is no advantage also of, right? Okay, so this point we have already discussed. Registers and memory transfer is managed by compiler. Cache and main memory is by cache controller or hardware, and main memory to disk is managed by OS and some program. Okay, I think we have not even finished 50% of what, no, maybe a few more slides are left out. Okay, only 3/4. Do you have 5 minutes or shall we stop? Do you have 5 to 10 minutes more? Yes or no? Already some people would have left. No, only one guy has left. Somebody can answer me. When is your next class? After this period?
Sir, it's at 3:15.
Okay, all right. Then I will stop because you need some break also. All right, so we'll start from here. Actually, it's nothing much left. It simply again describes what is cache philosophy, and then we have an example. Anyway, so we'll start from here in the next class. All right, please go through PPT because it's very important concept. That's the reason I have taken so much of so many slides, so much time to explain this. Okay. please go through it because it's very important concept and it's beautiful. I mean, I love reading about it.